Morehead Scholar and Rhodes Scholar Robyn Hadley has good advice for students who are planning for college, and maybe more importantly, good advice for their parents. And it's all assembled in her new book, Within View, Within Reach, Navigating the College-Bound Journey. And Robyn Hadley's here to share with us some of that advice on North Carolina Bookwatch next. Welcome to North Carolina Bookwatch. I'm D.G. Martin and my guest is Robyn Hadley, author of Within View, Within Reach. Robyn Hadley, welcome.
Thank you so much. It's good to be here. I'm glad to be here.
Well, what a great treat to have you here. Of course, you're a North Carolina native and
Yes.
you grew up in Graham, surrounded by your family and by friends in sort of small town, typical small town, rural America.
Pretty typical.
And then came to the University of North Carolina on a Morehead Scholarship,
Yes.
and then to Oxford University in England on a Rhodes Scholarship. And while we don't want to make too much of this, you're the first Southern African-American woman to win a Rhodes Scholarship.
Yes.
So we're proud of you.
It's humbling, for sure.
Well, it's something that North Carolinians can really be proud of. Now, your college-going experience is something that is also worth a book, but right now you're concentrating on the struggles that young people in high school and even before high school and their parents begin to have as they face the college-going experience. How'd you get into all this?
Well, I do think I had the good fortune of growing up in a small town and in Alamance County, and from there I think my own theme has been around the world to get back home. I've been very fortunate to work at least for the last few years for the Alamance Burlington school system and work to create some programming and resources for parents and students, really to help them get a better understanding of how to get to college and how to pay for it. And the book was an outgrowth of that experience and probably about 20 years of my own experiences and that of helping parents and students.
Is the college-going challenge different today than it was when you were moving towards college, or pretty much the same?
I think there are some aspects of it that are the same. Probably the fact that you've got to fill out the application, whether it's online or a hard copy.
Back to basics.
Absolutely. You've got to put together, I think, a very competitive academic record. You've got to be, I think, service-minded, civic-minded, pretty well-rounded to be competitive for certain colleges at any rate. So I think in that regard, that part of it hasn't changed. What has changed is I think it's much, much more competitive to get into certain colleges. It's more expensive. And I think there are more options, and sometimes more options give you more things to think about, like the opportunity, for example, to go to a two-year college, which is what more of our graduates are doing, at least in Alamance Burlington, and I think nationally, and from the community colleges go on and finish up at a four-year college.
Well, is that is that a recommended process for all students, or is that something that is just put on us because colleges are too expensive or too hard to get into? What's
I think
the deal?
it's probably all of the above, but I think the most important thing is that the role of the community college has greatly changed, I think, in the last 20 years. I think the kinds of jobs, again, in our global economy and in the economy in North Carolina have changed, and at least what we're finding in communications, whether it's with the CTE programs or business and industry or even
What's the CTE program?
I'm sorry, career and technical education programs in our public school systems. These are I think pathways, academic pathways that I think more of our students are being asked to think about or consider, primarily because business and industry are saying some jobs simply don't require a four-year degree. There are many, many jobs, many the trades and professions that require you to have some certification or a two-year degree, and you'll be fine. And so I think, again, my experience has been not just helping that student who's maybe bound to be a Morehead or a Park Scholar, but those students who might have that 2.0 and they're not sure where they want to go or what their career interest is. And so we've also got to do, I think, a better job of helping that student and that family figure out where their best fit is.
It's one thing when you're providing this counsel sort of hands-on and looking the parents and the students in the eye and coming to conclusions about what's right for, helping them come to conclusions about what's right for them. But to write a book in which you give general advice across the board, what's the general advice and how does it differ for this kind of specific advice that you give people?
I think the most important thing is I found myself, at least over the last several years, working with the Alamance Burlington school system, and even beyond that, I was getting the same questions from so many parents and students. And that might range from what math course does my 9th grader need to take, to what kinds of summer camps are available if my child is interested in dance or theater. And how do we understand what this financial aid award letter is actually saying to us? At the end of the day, what size is the check or the money order that we have to take to the financial aid office? So I was finding there were some general questions. One about the preparation process. What kinds of things should my middle schooler be doing? What kinds of conversations should I be having with my 10th grader? How do I approach my child's counselor or coach to help me understand the kinds of options that are available? So there was a process, I think, that I was beginning to see, again, from my own experiences as a first-generation college student, in my own experiences as a Moorhead or being able to travel abroad. So it was a bit of the personal experiences, but it was also just all these experiences from parents who were extremely well off to those who were not, and they had very, very similar questions. So I think it was trying to take those answers, trying to take some of those experiences, and just trying to take some of the information, whether it was websites or that type of thing, and try to put it in a bite-sized nugget type of package so it could be easy to read and easy to understand for any parent or any person who was working with a student.
Well, I want to take it just from a little bit different angle, and that is you're talking about the typical questions that you get from people, whether they've had the college-going experience as parents or not. But I'm wondering now, what are the questions that most people don't ask that they should be asking?
I think probably for high school parents, it would be to get a greater understanding, either from a counselor or a teacher, or maybe from another parent about what their student went through regarding just completion of the credits, making sure that your child has all the right credits to graduate from high school. From time to time, we meet those parents who are absolutely certain their child is going to a 4-year college, and they look up in the senior year and they realize their child doesn't have the right math credits, or their child hasn't taken the right number of foreign language courses. So I think you really have to have an understanding of just the basic requirements for high school graduation, which will lead you to a better understanding of the best fit for your child. And what we shouldn't lose in all of that is some conversations with the teenager to make sure your teenager is really interested in a 4-year college. I do think that we do have some parents who have a child that might be a 4th-generation Tar Heel, and they talk to that child and realize they don't want to go to Carolina at all. And so I think part of this is parents having giving that teenager some freedom to explore, helping them to explore to see what the best fit is. You know, is it a large campus? Is it a small campus? And ultimately, what's the best way for us to pay for it so the child and the family aren't saddled with a lot of debt?
Well, I think that's real important, and I got that from your book, that a lot of us assume improperly that when a child graduates from high school that child will have the necessary credits for admission to the school that he or she wants to go to, and it doesn't work that way. The child has to take some initiative to get that right, those right credits.
Absolutely. I think it really has to be a team effort, and if it's not the parent, that very often, more recently, it's the grandparent, it's a cousin, it's a coach. And again, conversely, if you take that student for whom college has never been a part of the home discussion or the discussion at class, at school, that kind of conversation really has to begin with a counselor or a teacher, or maybe again an older friend who's gone to college, so that child will get an understanding of what classes they need to take. Again, what kind of summer camps could be helpful in the process of exploring a career or a particular college. But there has to be more talking, I think, than there is right now between teenagers and adults. I think part of that process has also been handicapped a bit because our school counselors are swamped. The counselor-student ratios are pretty high, at least in our public schools. And in my conversations with parents who have children at private schools, even sometimes they're wanting deeper and broader conversations to get a better understanding of the steps they can take.
Well, I'd say, what advice would you give them? Of course, you'd say buy buy the book.
or go to the website.
Or go to the website, which is very generously shares much of the advice that you give in the book on your website. And how am I going to ask this question without getting in trouble, because I don't want to prejudge teenagers. A wide variety of attitudes and levels of motivation among teenage people, and at least some of them are just basically, you know, not interested in. I mean, they should go to college. They're smart enough. They've got good enough backgrounds. They've got talent, but they're just at a phase in life when they're not planning or not being plugged in. And is there a way to how do you deal with that challenge?
I think it's maybe a 2 or 3 way street even. I think one, children are very often creatures of habit, and they are doing a lot of times what they may see the adults around them do. So we do have to, I think, bring into the equation that if teenagers are not seeing parents put priority on certain things, like attending the parent-teacher conference, or starting the college visit process as early as the 8th or 9th or 10th grade, then the child a lot of times is not going to know necessarily to have that urgency or priority for certain things. So I think the adult in the picture many, many times has to lead the way. I also think we're going to have to re-examine, as is happening nationally, how we're teaching students. I don't think we can simply say, well, little Johnny's not getting algebra, so that's little Johnny. That's not the teacher. I do think we've got to have a greater re-examination of how we are teaching some of these subjects. Whether it's math or whether it's English or reading and that type of thing. So I think, again, further examinations of how we're teaching students. They're so visually minded. Again, they're on cell phones, they're on video games and that type of thing. So I think the integration of technology into the classroom, certainly I'm hoping, will be a way we can get more of our students engaged. And again, if I could just reflect on the title of the book, I didn't want the book to be a work that was only for the parents of an A or B student. I really wanted the book, or the message, if you will, or the resources, to be for adults who were trying to help any teenager figure it out, if you will. And I think part of what happens is we need to have more conversations with teenagers about what their options are. And that's what brings into view what may be the possibilities for a student, whether they're an A student or whether they're a C student. And once you have these within view, then it makes it easier to develop a plan to reach for those goals. Because I do think we have a fair number of 11th graders, and possibly of their parents, just to use one example, who might have some unrealistic expectations of what colleges and universities they could actually get into. So the sooner we can have some very realistic conversations about what's really within view, then we can have a better understanding of what's realistic to be in reach in the short term and possibly in the longer term.
Well, the college admissions process is sort of unforgiving in the sense that you ordinarily have one chance, one season, to apply to the colleges that you choose to apply to, that you'd like to go to. And if you haven't done it right, well, you can go back the next year and try again, but more than likely, this is kind of one at bat.
You know, I would probably disagree.
Well, go ahead.
In the following way, and this is part of where oftentimes I will tell parents, you know, this is really not a magic formula. It is a formula, but it's not a magic formula. With the advent of online courses, for example, you can start college pretty much any time. Depending upon what the rules and regulations are of that particular online university or the online courses that are offered by any number of the public and private universities here in North Carolina. So the traditional idea of starting in August and January doesn't have to be hard and fast. The other thing that happens is more of our high school students can begin to take college credit courses, and some of them through the early college system or the middle college system can come out possibly with associate degrees or quite a few credits, which will at least make the tuition bill a little bit less when they begin to matriculate at a 2-year or a 4-year college. There are, of course, a fair number of students who go away to that 4-year institution and they come back with all Fs by December.
Yeah, we've heard those stories.
And that's a student again.
And well, that's interesting because it's not unheard of.
Right.
And so let's talk about that for just a minute. That you've successfully negotiated the admissions process, and that you've gotten in the school of your choice, and then, as sometimes happens when the young person gets to college, the lifestyle changes and the challenges are so different that it just doesn't work this time. And it doesn't mean that that person's destined not to succeed in life, but they've just gone through it. Now, how do you counsel a parent who's just devastated when the child comes home like that?
I think part of that too is that whole exploration process. And it's the social transition piece that we don't talk a whole lot about. You know, if you're about to send your child 6 hours away to college and he's probably never stayed more than a week away from home, you know, as a teenager, that's a big jump, but we really don't think about it a lot. We just say, well, they're an 18-year-old, they're a high school graduate, they can handle it. But one of the reasons, for example, that I'm very encouraging of students and parents to pursue summer camp opportunities is that it gives that child a chance to have some responsibility, whether it's keeping up with a room key, managing money, learning how to do laundry, or that type of thing. So part of it is the social transition, and sometimes students get away. It's the first time they've had any freedom. They may not be able to adjust to the reading, just the academic workload, the freedom of social time and that type of thing. What happens is that student clearly has a debt to pay because they've run up a bill and now they've got an academic transcript. So it may take some time to say, okay, maybe we should come back and start at the community college. Maybe that's the best way to do it. Sometimes if that student has to go into academic probation, that institution will give that student the kinds of things they have to do, if you will, if they want to apply or to be readmitted. So I do think there could be some options, but I think, again, there have to be some serious conversations about, one, whether that child is ready to go off to college. If you've never given your child more than $200 in cash at one time, and you give them a debit card with $1,000 on it and say, you know, be careful with that.
What should you? When will we learn? Yeah, when will we learn? Well, you know, you keep coming back, and you do this in your book as well, which was kind of a surprise. Not that I disagree with you at all, but it was sort of a surprise, the emphasis on summer camps. And as a sort of like an inoculation for this time away from home that happens at the freshman year of college. And how are middle-income people going to pay for this summer camp experience? This is expensive stuff, isn't it?
Well, I think whether, again, they're middle-income, low, or high, some of these camps are actually free. Now, you have to do your homework to find them, but you have camps that are free. You have camps that might be anywhere from $50 to $100 to $200, and you certainly have camps that can cost you well over $1,000. One of the first places to look is university websites. Any university in the state of North Carolina, for example, we in Alamance Burlington have a partnership with NC State, for example. So you can go onto NC State's website. Usually you'll have to click on prospective students, summer camps, enrichment programs, and from there you can get information about camp. North Carolina A&T is another example where these institutions, both public and private, have summer camps very often for the children of faculty, but very often for children in the larger community. But you do have to start early, and I encourage folks to start as early as possible, just kind of doing some homework to see what would be a good fit. Like anything else you're shopping for, check with other parents who might have sent their children to the program, or again, there might be information on the websites. But again, in my personal experience, I did 4-H camp, I did basketball camp, I did music camps, and we certainly struggled to pay for some of those.
Well, and you feel, in your own personal experience, that the camps prepared you for the break that you made when you came to Carolina, and prepared you to compete for a Morehead Scholarship.
I think it did that, and I think probably one of the most important things, I think, is that the summer camp experience takes you out of your immediate classroom, out of your immediate community, so you can see what the competition is. That's the most important thing. I think one of the reasons some of our students are not as motivated as they could be is we make it very comfortable for them to kind of just stay home during the summer. Governor School, as one example, was a tremendous opportunity for me because you really got to see what's incredibly bright and scientific-minded and arts-minded students from across the state of North Carolina were doing, and you got to come back to high school and say, okay, well, I better get really down to work now, because these are students I'm probably going to compete with, whether it's for scholarships or college admission. We do this without even thinking about it for athletics. When we know we've got a very strong athlete in our community, we put them on the best teams. They play travel ball. They go to summer camps, and we send them outside the community to get the best competition they can get as athletes. But we don't do that with our 5th graders who show promise in science, or our 9th graders who show promise in the arts necessarily. So that's why I'm a big proponent, because I think summer camps were very helpful for me, but they show students and parents the competition that's out there, so it's not a surprise when you get ready to apply for scholarships in college down the road.
Well, I love your book, and I love the advice
Thank
that
you.
you've shared with us. And as you mentioned, you have a website that'll be easily, I think, just Google your name.
Within View, withinreach.com. We've got a Facebook page. We welcome comments from parents and others about ways we can help. We're in the process of, we've had some requests to have the book translated into Spanish and some other languages, and we're in the process of setting up information sessions and that type of thing for both public and private high school parents and students to kind of teach them some of these strategies, if you will.
Well, I'm happy to have the chance to talk about this book and your advice, but one of the books that I hope that you'll write is what I'd like to talk about right now, and that is your experience growing up as a young African-American young woman in a time of transition,
Mm-hmm.
maybe at the end of the real tough times of transition, but you had to face some challenges in terms of competing for a Moorhead Scholarship, getting a Moorhead Scholarship, coming to Carolina where things were still changing.
Well, I've had some great mentors along the way, for sure, through the Moorhead Foundation, through the athletic program at Carolina, my school counselor in my own community, extended family, and there are some other books in the pipeline, but again, if it weren't for family, and again, a lot of great teachers and coaches and others in Alamance County, and then when I got here to Chapel Hill, I think the story might be a little bit different.
Well, let's talk about that story a
Sure.
little bit. And talk about the first day that you came on campus with, as a result of all these camps, your athletic talent, you're a Moorhead Scholar. Did you just walk in and
No.
everything fell in place for you?
It did not. I think it would not be unfair for me to say that I was frightened. More than anything, probably by the size. I think mentally, a lot of us say, no, we want to go to Carolina. But Carolina is a big city compared to Graham to make that transition, at least in the fall of 1981, which is when I came. So I think the size of the place was something that I needed to get used to. Just finding buildings, probably all the typical things you go through as a freshman, and then getting used to the larger classes initially. So I think just getting used to the flow and the pace of a university of this size, and kind of finding your place in it. I was very fortunate, again, that I was able to play basketball when I was here, so there was a small family of sorts, and a way to help you find your way.
It's interesting to me, I don't want to push you on this, but from my perspective,
Sure.
you come in and you're part of a basketball family, which would be athletes. You'd be very comfortable with African-American young women on the team as well. And then you got your Moorhead family, which it would be largely
Not
white,
as diverse as it is now.
Not as diverse, not as diverse. And so you're challenged to fit in and be a positive part of both of these without putting either one of them down, building both of them.
Not at all. Not at all. Again, I think that was the beauty, again, probably of having a mom who equipped me and my younger brothers for the world we were coming into. You know, one of the things I have probably reflected on more in writing this book and kind of thinking through some ideas maybe about some future books is the fact that I went to kindergarten in 1968. And at that time, really color didn't matter to me. As a 5-year-old, I was excited. I loved to read. And I was just ready to go to school, and while I was the only African American in that particular kindergarten class, I had a great kindergarten experience. And so I think some of those activities along the way, and the fact that my mother was in the school system. Yeah. She was a school secretary, retired after 40 years as a school secretary, and she had a sense of what I needed to know, what my brothers and I needed to participate.
We need to do something special to celebrate your mama, but we just got a minute.
Sure.
And we talk about, in that minute, talk about the Rhodes Scholarship experience in Oxford. What did that do for you?
Just exposed me to the world more than anything else. The opportunity to travel, the opportunity to meet students and professors from just around the world. Got to have a much better understanding of what the global economy really is, what international trade really means, and just make some great friendships with American students and those from around the world, and we still keep in touch.
And with all of that, what brought you back to Graham, North Carolina to serve?
Well, there are probably a couple of things. My mom's health was one, and just an opportunity to have a bit of a sabbatical, to be quite honest. I lost some folks in my life that were very dear to me, and I think when you have that kind of loss, it gives you an opportunity to really re-examine some of the things that are important to you. And the thing that I knew I loved doing more than anything else was working with students and helping them see what was out there in the same way that a lot of folks had helped me get from Graham around the world to get back home.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming back and sharing that experience, and thanks for what you're doing to help the college-going experience go a little bit easier for our North Carolina kids.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, thanks to Robyn Hadley for her new book, Within View, Within Reach. Thanks to her for visiting with us and sharing her experience with us, and thanks to you for listening and watching, and I hope that you'll join me again same time next week when I introduce you to another one of North Carolina's great authors. See you then.
Funding for North Carolina Bookwatch is made possible through the financial contributions of viewers like you, who invite you to join them in supporting UNC TV, and by the North Carolina Humanities Council.